Morning,
Hey, good
Ashton.
morning, everybody, and welcome to today's service workshop, which is going to be led by University of Witwatersrand and is on leveraging course evaluation feedback for student success initiatives. It's very good to see how popular the service workshop is, so that we hope you'll be able to stay for the entire duration of the workshop and you'll find it beneficial. Great. So thanks very much. If I can hand it over to Wits.
Okay. Thank you, Ashton. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Good morning, colleagues. Let me just try and share my screen quickly. To share.
Yes, we can see your screen. If you just want to put
Okay,
it in presentation mode. There we go. Thank you.
wonderful. Thanks, Ashton. Morning, colleagues. I am Thakatau Hlakotsa from the University of the Witwatersrand, and I will be conducting the workshop for today. So, in terms of what we'll be going through, we're leveraging course evaluation feedback to drive or support student success. So, in terms of what we're trying to achieve with this workshop is a lot of universities have large data sets um, containing course evaluations data. So we've sort of been on an exercise or a project to try and actually get as much insights from these course evaluations since they tend to be one of the only sources that universities have of course feedback from the students themselves. So that is the whole purpose of this workshop. I've tried to make it as interactive as possible. So in terms of the content that we'll be going through, firstly is the welcome and overview, which is what we're doing now. And then we'll be going through understanding the course evaluation data. So what I've done in this instance is we'll be using a sample data set from, I found this on the Mendeley website. So it's just data that has been collected already, and it's free to use for any sort of exercise. So it's not our university data. So it's a sample data set, and then we'll just be going through the characteristics of this data set and also trying to understand exactly what sort of insights we can try to gain from evaluating this data set. We'll have a breakout session at around 10 a.m. And this is where Ashton will be taking you through different bakery rooms, and then you'll be completing an exercise. So for the first one, we'll just be using Excel, and then you'll be going through that data set and answering some questions. Then we'll have a feedback session for 20 minutes where I'll randomly select people from groups and then they'll sort of give their feedback as to what were their findings from the breakout session. We'll have a 15-minute break. And then at 10 from 10:40 to 10:55, it's a little bit wonky, but I was trying to make sure that we actually have time to go through all of the different sessions that we need to go through. Then after the break, we'll be going through the techniques and tools for data-driven analysis. It was quite difficult finding a free-to-use tool that's easily understood, but I think the tool that we'll be using today gets us 80% of the way there. So it will need an installation, but you'll be given time to do that. And then in terms of the techniques and tools, the tools it's called Orange. Some of you might have heard of it already, but that's fine. So that's the tool that we'll be using, and it's a open source software, and it's mostly visual. So there'll be no coding involved. We'll be using nodes and connecting them to each other and seeing what sort of output we can get out. After this session, then we'll have the breakout session, which is 30 minutes. Here you'll be applying some of the techniques that we've spoken about in the previous session, and you'll be getting some outputs and answering some questions. Then we'll have a feedback session, which is also 30 minutes. where we'll just be going through your findings from the breakout session. Then I'm hoping, if we're still on time, then we'll go through an evaluation-informed data-driven framework. This is sort of to give the participants ideas on how you can actually sort of try implementing a data-driven framework using course evaluations at your institution. Okay, so if everyone is happy with that, I think we can start. Okay. So in terms of the objectives of the workshop, we have three main goals. I'll go through them one by one. So firstly, we'll be going through how feedback systems are designed and used and how they've sort of improved over time. So I did a bunch of research just to contextualize what we're trying to do here and sort of understand um, how course evaluations have been utilized before. Then we'll look at how institutions have used data for systematic change. So this is basically telling us some of the use cases in terms of how the universities have used this data. And then we'll be going through some of the tools that you can use for large scale qualitative feedback analysis. So this is just so that you have an idea of what's out there if you haven't actually started using any of these tools, just to give you um, an idea of the sort of tools that you can use. Okay. Uh, this is supposed to be, sorry, let me just, okay, yeah, okay. I hope you can see the poll here. Okay. So if you don't mind, could you please just scan the QR code and sort of let us know what is your current role at your institution? I'm just trying to get an idea of um what it looks like in terms of the participation. Sorry, colleagues. I just need to open my Mentimeter from the administrative side so I can see what's happening. But I'll just put the presentation up again. Okay. So there are five options. It's academic staff, institutional researchers, data analyst or data scientist or anyone on the data team. There's quality and planning, and then there's other. I'll just give a few more, maybe 20 seconds. Uh, 17 in other. I wonder what those could be. Could we maybe just get some chat responses as well as to what other actually means? Because that seems to be the biggest portion. Okay. It seems to have balanced out a bit. Let me see what's in the chat. Academic advisor, special projects, manager responsible for evaluations, senior lecturer. Yeah, I think academic stuff was there in the options. Um, maybe I should have put two options, academic staff and lecturers. Instruction and learning designer. Okay. Project program manager. Okay. So it seems like we do have quite a bit of diversity when it comes to the other option, but it seems it's mostly people who actually have a need for this data. So I think we can continue. All right then. So in terms of the types of course feedback systems that we have, I did mention before that course evaluations have been improving for the past couple of years, but these are some of the traditional evaluation methods which you can come across when you're looking into this sort of thing. We have the SET, which is the student evaluation of teaching. SET is basically a standardized term for end of course surveys. So these are completed by the students at the end of the course. So um, once assessments have been done and whatnot, this is typically before the final exam, where you would have this end of course survey. The students are sitting down for their final lecture and then they're answering those surveys or course evaluations. So in terms of what the evaluations look like, you will have the 1 to 5 Likert scale, which is basically going from strongly disagree. Let's say you were asked a question, it goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree in increments of 1 all the way up to 5. So 1 would be strongly disagree, and then 5 would be strongly agree, with 3 being in the middle as a neutral response. So this typically includes Likert scale items, and then they talk about the clarity in terms of the course content. They talk about the organization, how well organized the lecture was, the lecturer's enthusiasm and interest, if they were able to generate interest in the course. And these are called standard evaluations of teaching. And then we also have SEEQ, which is students' evaluations of education. This it's a survey instrument which was developed by surname Marsh in the 1980s, and it covers 8 distinct dimensions of teaching quality. So this is enthusiasm, which mentioned before. Then we have organization. We have rapport, learning value. So how much value did the student perceive to have gained out of the lecture's content or teaching methods? And then group interaction. So those are some of the dimensions. This was designed specifically to move away from single number ratings by capturing multiple dimensions of effective teaching. So this improves reliability and interpretability of results. We will see some of these in the course evaluations data that we will be going through. And then finally, we have the course experience questionnaire. This was a specific questionnaire from Australia. So it was a survey tool developed in Australia to measure students' perceptions of their course experience post-graduation. Um, I suppose in I think in our university it will be the end of year survey that the students fill in during the graduation ceremony. So there will be something similar to this one. It includes items on teaching quality, generic skill development, assessments, and workload. And it was introduced to evaluate academic standards across institutions and to provide public accountability. So it's quite standardized in the in Australia's system, and it's basically used to both measure quality of the content and also for national benchmarking. So it's something that has been standardized and is actually being used at a national level. It was introduced to evaluate academic standards across institutions and to promote public accountability. So we have these 3 different types of assessments. In terms of contemporary methods, we have mid-course evaluations where if a lecturer is basically undertaking a course, somewhere in the middle of the course progression, then they'll have some sort of evaluation to get an idea of how students are doing in the course. Then we have online surveys. These are usually on your LMS systems, your learning management systems, which are online. So you would be polling students and getting an idea of, um, well, just polling them and getting like instant classroom feedback. So it's more so in the moment. Then we have real-time polling and polling via learning management systems. It's more of the same in terms of the online surveys since it is an online system, but it's mostly just getting current real-time feedback. So those are the contemporary methods that are being used now. But one benefit of the real-time polling via learning management systems is that now you have um, these natural sentiment analysis and natural language processing models, which you can basically use in the system to just sort of get a deeper exploration of the data. So if you're having open-ended questions, you can use some of these techniques and models which are made available via these systems to just get a deeper understanding of what sort of challenges the students are facing, maybe in the course content or in terms of the workload. Okay, then even more modern, we have participatory and dialogue approaches. So we have students as partners in evaluation design. So this is really quite progressive in terms of how these are handled. So students in this modality, students are actually a collaborative partner in the evaluation approach. So the people who are designing these evaluations are actually sitting down with students. This could be students representatives or the class representatives. You're sitting down and you're actually trying to get an idea of what sort of additions they can bring to the evaluation process. So it's very collaborative and it's basically using students as partners in the design of the evaluation. Then you have peer and self-evaluation. I believe these are mostly used in like business school type of courses where students give a reflection on their own learning experience. And in addition to that, they're also evaluating their peers' contribution. So this could be in a project-based course where students have to work with each other and then they're giving their experience or their evaluations as well as reflecting on their peers' contribution. Okay, so in terms of why this is important, because it's one thing to go through the context in the literature, but so why should we be focused on actually getting a hold on this course evaluation stuff? The first reason, it provides crucial student feedback. And by that, we means it captures the student voice. This is one of the few ways that you can actually get students' feedback on what's happening in the classroom. Because usually you would have these surveys which are being sent out sporadically during the year or during the semester or whatever the case may be. And that is one way, but some of those have quite low response rates, and students don't typically like to bother with those in the first place. So the evaluations, it offers like a sit-down opportunity for students to actually say, reflect on their experience, and then tell us what's actually happening in the classroom. It's one of the most scalable and systematic methods we have for understanding how students are experiencing their education beyond just feedback from the grades. Okay, so in terms, we've gotten the feedback, and now we can actually look at this feedback to identify hidden barriers that students are coming across when it comes to their achieving success. So let's say, for instance, you're looking at a course evaluation data set, and then you notice that maybe one of the key key priorities that students are talking about is the workload. The workload for this course is just simply too much. That is something that you can get from that evaluation feedback and then actually take steps to addressing for future iterations of that course's um, life cycle. So because students are the first ones to experience broken systems, some of these being like stuff like outdated curriculum, poor assessment methods and inaccessible teaching methods. These evaluations give us that leeway into designing them so that we can make these issues visible and also detect them so that we can bring some sort of change to how we conduct these courses. So it can influence curriculum planning, policies, and support services, which we have addressed. And then it also strengthens institutional accountability and trust. Because imagine how much of a positive impact it would be for students to know that if I'm giving my institution this feedback, then they're actually going to use it to make learning um, and the learning process easier or better for students going forward. It brings about that sort of commitment and investment into the process from the student side as well, because they know that you're actually going to use this data for some sort of good after you've gotten it. Okay, so we've discussed what course evaluations are, and we have spoken about why they matter. So I just want to get an idea if the participants in the colleagues actually have access to this course data. I'll share the QR code shortly. Just give me a second. Okay. There's the QR code. So I just want to get an indication of if you actually have access to this data, this course evaluations data. Okay, I see there's quite a number of responses saying no access at all, which is a little bit concerning. For the people who are responding to no access at all, could you maybe say in the chat if you know where this data is or whether you know if it's been collected? Firstly, do you know if it's been collected? And if it is being collected, do you know where it is sitting? Okay, so like
Sorry,
he's saying,
sorry.
he would.
We've just had a request where you have QR codes, if you could place it in the chat, because not everyone's able to scan the QR codes. And then just a question, what you're asking about now is just general course evaluation. It's not specific for the breakaway coming up, right? You just want
No.
to know if people have access to course evaluation information within their institution.
Yes, exactly.
Great, thanks.
Let me try and see if I can copy and send the QR code.
Or the URL if possible.
Okay, I think
Thanks.
should be able to open the URL. Okay, colleagues, just to clarify again, I'm basically asking if you have access to course evaluation data at your institution. So not in general, or do you have some sort of data set sitting? No, I'm just asking if you personally have access to a course evaluation data set, you know where it's sitting, and you're able to access it at your institution. Okay, we have a response from Graham saying, in my institution, this data sits with a separate center, which means that I can only access the data on a request approval basis. Okay. All right. I think the responses have more or less balanced out. So we have 15 people saying that yes, they do have full access to course evaluations data. Then we have 7 people saying yes, but they have limited access. And then we have 12 people saying that they do not have access at all to this data. And then 5 people saying that they're unsure. So that's 39 responses. Okay. Mm, okay, but I see that yeah, it's more or less a lot of people do. It's like half and half. It's like half don't have access and then half don't have access. Okay. I think we can move on. Okay. You've already identified one of the challenges, which is actually some of the it's hard to get access to this data sometimes in different institutions just based on their data policies or whether this data is actually being collected and stored appropriately at all. But some of the other challenges that we have regarding course evaluations data that you do get cases where there are low response rates. In certain classes, towards the end of the course or towards the end of the term, you find that students are so preoccupied with preparing for exams or working on projects that the class size physically has actually gone down. So you do get low response rates in those instances. One way to get around this is to actually have intermittent evaluations taking place throughout the course's um duration instead of just having it at the end, because at the end you do have those challenges where students are just not available. Then when you do actually have this data and you're going through it, then some of those data can be really quite biased. Um, there was a paper that I came across that talked about how some students would actually rate certain instructors lower just based on their gender. Specifically, female instructors would consistently receive lower scores than male counterparts. In a context like South Africa, you can imagine that being actually a big deal. And then in terms of race as well, you can extrapolate that to race as well and see that sort of bias coming through. Um, so studies show that evaluations can be influenced by factors unrelated to teaching quality. This is gender, race, discipline, or even perceived grading leniency. So students will sometimes just dislike you for whatever reason. And you will see that come through sometimes in terms of how they respond to the course evaluations. Another thing is misinterpretation of comments when you do have um, the evaluation data set available. This is basically when you have open text comments or open-ended questions, they can be misinterpreted or even weaponized, particularly when institutions like training or guidelines on qualitative analysis. Many staff report focusing disproportionately on negative feedback, even if it's only one comment among hundreds, which can undermine morale. So if a course coordinator is actually looking at this data, going through it, sometimes you come across particularly mean comment, and that has more of an impact on you than maybe some of the even larger amounts of positive comments. So I think one of the things that we'll discuss later on is actually the benefits of using these tools, because you can sort of circumvent some of these things because it takes away some of that ad hominem stuff that you can get in the comments. So another, well, one of the challenges is risks when this data is used in HR related decisions. So it's more so if you're trying to use this data in making HR decisions, let's say for instance, promotions or contract renewals, this can result in risk-averse teaching and discourage experimentation in terms of the lectures. It's really quite important to actually articulate these. The point of these evaluations is that you're actually trying to make the learning process better for the students, and it shouldn't necessarily be taken as a way to be punitive towards a lecturer or a coordinator. Institutions need to contextualize scores carefully and complement them with peer review or teaching portfolios so that we can actually circumvent some of this. They shouldn't be used for a punitive um, process, but rather to sort of inform what changes need to be made to make the process easier for students. Okay. So in terms of using a course evaluation feedback to drive change, um, it's important to just not focus on individual. Okay, well, there is it is important to actually focus on the individual course assessment and actually get feedback for that particular course. But in terms of using it strategically at an institutional level, you can actually aggregate this feedback across units, across faculties, across schools to see what sort of consistencies are you getting in terms of the feedback. So for instance, if certain courses or a large number of courses are coming back saying that there is a problem with the workload in terms of this course, then you can see that's something that is occurring across units. The same thing, let's say, perhaps with availability of resources. I know that in engineering faculties and whatnot, even science for the chemicals, you have the issue of lab space. So if you're having large classes, are students actually able to go and do the experiments um, in the labs, given that the labs usually have size constraints? So if you're seeing stuff like that prop up, then that's something that can be um, uh, investigated and driven at a institution, faculty, or school level. Then you can also use the feedback in curriculum and policy reform, which is obviously the first priority in terms of evaluating this. Then also guide resource allocation, what we just talked about in terms of lab space and such. So you can also use this feedback in terms of quality assurance. Let's say you are analyzing courses for different, like courses in a specific school, and you're seeing that, okay, uh, the majority of these courses are actually getting quite good reviews, then you know that you're doing something right. You can actually even extract out that insight and see what it is that you're doing right and make sure that you keep on doing that. Similarly, you can do the same in terms of what you're doing wrong. You extract that out at a unit level or school level, then you sort of work on that and see what needs to be improved. So in that instance, you can use it for quality assurance to just make sure that your offerings are consistent across all of the different courses. So, um, okay. So in terms of this, we discussed some of the common challenges that you come across. Um, Here, let me just, I need to share the QR code again. Mm. So I'm trying to get an idea here of how you, in your institution, what are the main challenges you've experienced regarding a course feedback? So this is mainly for the colleagues who responded that they do actually have this data set at hand. So now, in terms of utilizing that data, what sort of what are your experiences or challenges in terms of that feedback? Do you have low participation mainly? Do you have bias problems? The QR code is, sorry. Yeah. For some reason, it's not showing up on the slide. I'm going to try and share the link instead. Okay. Okay, colleagues, sorry about that. Please refer to the link. The QR code is not showing. But the question is, what are the main challenges you've experienced with course feedback at your institution? So this is for the colleagues who mainly responded that they do have access. So in terms of what you're seeing with the course feedback, is it low participation? Is it bias, unclear comments, too much data, no action, stuff like that?
Sorry, the code that you've posted is taking us back to the previous one.
Oh, okay.
On my side, yes.
Oh, I was at the wrong slide. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me just resend. Okay. So the question is, what are the main challenges you've experienced with course feedback at your institution? Is it low participation? Is it bias? Unclear comments? Too much data? No action? Okay, I see immediately that low participation is big and in the center. So most people experiencing low participation in terms of the course feedback. Meaningless. Hmm. So I'm assuming that means that it's actually not being used in any way or form by the institution. Unreliable data, access, yes, low response rate, timely data, two general statements. Okay. Fear of victimization. Hmm. I'm assuming this would be for staff promotions and stuff like that. And sometimes I guess we do have heads heads or teams which are not particularly supportive. Data systems are not linked. Okay, so this is more of a data integration issue. All right. I think we've had 43 responses. That's quite a lot. I think we can stop there. So in terms of the comments that are coming through, low participation is basically the largest one of the bunch. The students are not filling in the course evaluations. And then no action is also up there. Okay. Right. Thank you, colleagues. So basically, given some of these challenges that you're experiencing, let's see if some of the tools that we're about to go through can actually assist with these challenges. I'm not sure about low participation. I think that's more of a administrative and logistics based problem. It's more so students actually in the class are filling out these participations. Are they easily accessible if the students are not in class? And is there a policy that says students actually have to fill out these evaluations? So I think this is more logistics and administration. But I think when it comes to things like no action, then that's simply where now the obligation falls on the person who has access to this. Like, are you able to meaningfully share insights based on this data and actually drive action in your specific units? Okay. So now, why should we use AI for feedback analysis? It's not necessarily AI. I think maybe a better term would be machine learning or statistical models, because that's what some of these tools are based on. It's not necessarily artificial intelligence, which is a little bit more advanced. But so think of it as statistical models or what's the other term? Machine learning. Okay, so we basically have evaluations data which has open-ended questions or open-ended comments, and these are quite rich in information. But the main issue is that these are unstructured and it's laborious or labor intensive to actually glean insights from these open-ended questions. Course coordinators or lecturers already have quite large workloads in terms of creating course content, marking, giving students feedback. So having to sit down and actually go through, for especially for large classes, these open-ended questions where there can be hundreds and hundreds of responses or even words, then it becomes a little bit difficult. So manual reading or reviewing evaluation feedback does not scale. It's one person sitting down. It does not scale. So this can be prohibitively time consuming. Not getting around to doing it just because it's such a laborious, time consuming exercise. So these tools, machine learning tools and statistical tools, can help with certain things like sentiment analysis, where if you're looking at a specific comment, you can glean whether this is actually a positive, neutral, or negative comment. So this tells you if it is a critique, it is how do you say, a commendation, or it's just simply neutral. Then you can have topic modeling, which is you're actually extracting out specific topics which students are noting down as a concern. You can do this in an automated way so that you don't actually have to sit down and do it yourself. Then you can also summarize these findings to sort of, if you want to drive some sort of action or change, you can summarize these findings and hopefully get the change that you're trying to action at your institution. So a huge benefit of these tools is that they can work at scale. Like we said before, the manual reading process is just too time consuming. You can have, let's say, for instance, that you even have historical data in terms of the course evaluations, and your institution has not made it a priority to actually analyze past data, but it is there. You can actually use these tools to go back and automatically analyze all of these evaluations and sort of see what challenges students have actually been experiencing um, in terms of the for previous years and then for current years as well. So you get that sort of timeline to see what actually has been taking place. So a huge benefit is that once you've sort of gotten out this information, you are able to link this analysis to your strategic objectives. So are you aiming to actually improve student satisfaction, inclusivity, if that is one of your objectives, workload management, feedback systems should generate insight with a purpose, otherwise they become an annual exercise with no impact. Institutions love to have analysis that goes into depth about what the issues are, but at the end of the day, you find that very little action is actually taken to address some of these things. Um, okay, before I go to the next slide, let me just check one of the comments. It says, I would be curious to know which tools you're referring to here. Sentiment analysis seems to be the most developed, but it's still inaccurate since our students are second language speakers. Okay. LLM analysis misses a lot of LMM analysis misses a lot of responses and only looks at around 20% of the responses. Okay. Tony said that I differ that low participation is due to administrative, not logistics problems. Institutions with well-established processes also report the same problems. Maybe there may be a more important issue that we downplay by saying it is merely a logistic or admin issue. Okay, important and noted. Okay, colleagues. So we're going to go through a data set. Like I mentioned before, this is the Mendeley data set. It's an open evaluation course data set, and it's from Rate My Professors. That's the website, I believe. So it has ratings where students are given a number from 1 to 5 on how well they think the course lecturer performed, and then there's also open-ended questions which are under the comments section. So I'm going to share this as an Excel sheet, but maybe I'll also give the .csv as well, but that will be needed at the next stage since the tool that we're using will only accept comma separated values as a format. But for now, I'll just give it as an Excel. And then this is the original link to that specific set. I'll share it in the chat, but you don't need to use this one now. I'll actually be sharing the data set shortly. Okay, so that's the link to the full data set. But I will be sharing the one that we'll be using today. Just give me a second, please. Sorry, colleagues, I'm having a bit of a challenge here. Please just give me 5 minutes. I'll be sending it through shortly. Ashton.
Hi, Thakatau. He's in another meeting. How can I help? It's cool.
So I just need to attach, I'm trying to attach this Excel file to the chat.
Okay, I'm seeing rate my professor in the chat and click to download. Is that the one you're wanting?
Yes, you able so you can see it. It's there.
Yes, it's in the chat.
Okay.
And it says click to download.
Yes, so that is the data set.
Okay, so it's there. So do you want us all to download it?
Yes, please. So for everyone to all the participants, please download that, and then I'm also going to share a link to the instructions for the breakaway.
Okay. When do you anticipate going into the breakaway? On schedule in a few minutes?
Let me just check. Yes, so 10 o'clock we should be going into the breakout sessions. I've shared the data set that the participants will be going through, and then I've also shared the instructions as a link to a Google Docs presentation. So colleagues, the reason why I've done it this way is because I was able to basically insert videos where you can follow along to what is actually happening in terms of the instructions. So instead of just having instructions, you can actually see little short snippets of what you're supposed to be doing. So here's my suggestion for how to go through the breakout session. I think maybe just spend the first 3 to 5 minutes just selecting who. This should be someone who's a little bit comfortable in Excel. Please just select someone who will be going through the exercise with everyone in the breakout room. So what you'll be doing is they'll be sharing their screen and going through the exercise, and then everyone will be giving their input as you go along. There are questions at the end where you're supposed to just come up with certain answers to those questions, and then that's what we'll be discussing when we come back. So basically just spend the first 3 to 5 minutes. Somebody should volunteer or be selected to actually go along, share the exercise and go along with everyone, and then answer the questions at the end.
Before we go into the breakout, Ku, I just want to ask the Northwest University colleagues, we had challenges with the registration for the workshop. So some of the colleagues on Northwest University scroll up to the list of participants, and if the top name in the list is Kudeja Parker with in brackets me next to your name, you need to change your name to your name and then Northwest University, please. So there's a number of Northwest University colleagues who are still in this meeting as Kudeja Parker. So
Yeah,
please
thanks.
scroll up to your list. Then when the top of your list is Kudeja Parker, brackets me, then you are one of the Northwest University colleagues that need to change your name, please. Thanks, Kudeja.
Thanks, Rassi. We figured out, Rassi, who are your colleagues. So we have actually put them in a breakaway. So colleagues, basically you will go into breakaways according to region, or where we had sufficient colleagues, from one institution, you will then just be with your institution. So I know that is the case with the NWU people, but rest of you will be going into breakaways according to region. And that will be in a minute or so.
Okay.
Okay, I can open the rooms now if everybody's ready.
Ready.
Thanks.
Okay, opening more rooms. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're all back. Ashton, Kudeja?
Yes, we are. We should all be back. It was automatic, Thakatau.
Okay, right. Um, okay, colleagues, so that was the first session. Um, I'm just going to share again so that we can maybe go through some of the feedback. This is this is basically the last part of the slides. Colleagues, I am aware that we all have different capabilities in terms of what we're able to do with these tools. So I tried my utmost to keep it as straightforward as possible so that we can actually get through these exercises in 30 minutes. I am aware that some of you might find it quite rudimentary, but that's fine as well. But the main purpose was that even colleagues who are not so familiar, even with Excel, can actually do these exercises and get and answer some of these questions. So if you find it a little bit basic, I'm sorry about that. But that was the intention behind this. Okay. Okay, so I think what we'll do now is that we'll go through some of the feedback. Can I get a volunteer from one of the groups who will actually take us through what they did and how they answered these questions? Just quick 5 minutes.
Herman, can you please do it for us, please?
Good morning, colleagues. Sorry, I was quickly in thoughts there. So we went up until the point where just before this very last slide, just to sort of get a basic understanding of the analysis of the question. So essentially we got the count of the how many modules were evaluated and an average score for the lecturers and then for the student difficulties. But then, as you mentioned just now, because it is we have different experiences with Excel. It was one of our colleagues mentioned an introductory course to Excel as well. So we did not get to the point where we selected a module and read out the comments for that specific one. But essentially, what we found was effectively just the counts and the averages. I'm not sure if you're expecting us to present those as well.
No, that's fine. Did you perhaps get to read some of the comments and get some sort of insight?
Unfortunately, we didn't get to that point. I'm not sure if some of the other groups were a bit faster with that instruction.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Herman. Could we please get another volunteer who...
Excuse me, this is Slingiwe. I did read a bit when I still had comments for one module, and I got concerned by the mentioning of lecturers' names. Yes, when students are very irate, they will mention the person's name, and when they're very happy, they'll also mention a person's name. And with the confidentiality of this data, I would like us to get to a point of how should we treat that.
Okay, so this is free to use data, colleagues, as I mentioned at the beginning. So it's available for anyone who has an internet connection to actually, it's been sourced by the Rate My Professors people, and then they've made it available publicly. So even if you do see the names there, I'm not sure how they treated them, but the reason why I didn't use internal data is because of those reasons where you'll see names of people pop up and even concerns with the student. The student might also maybe reveal themselves. So this data is
Yeah.
it's safe to use.
Yes, I'm aware of that. This one was public data. I'm
Oh, you're saying
just
that as a concern.
in terms as a concern for us practitioners.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you for
Yeah.
that, Lingiwe.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Can we get another volunteer, please?
Can I volunteer?
Go for it, Lucky.
Also, sure. Regarding these questions, what areas of concern jumped out? So we sat down, we looked at the data, and we started noticing a few problems that, for example, we're looking at psychology, and then we noticed that there's actually more than one lecturer here, which was questionable, the data collection, because you can't, initially we thought it was one. We noticed that this is actually about three different lecturers, and we got these three different responses. We made it difficult to sort of filter out which lecturer they're speaking about. That was the biggest area of concern that came out. And then we also identified some themes generalistically, some themes that came out. We saw that one of the things we identified was styles of teaching, clarity in terms of the teaching, the workload, expectations, rudeness, bias, and a liberal and lack of engagement. Those are the themes we saw in the comments. And then unfortunately, we couldn't get to the actionable steps we could do to address the issues, but those are the things we picked up as a group. Yeah.
All right.
If there's anything I've missed, I think colleagues can add a bit there if I missed anything.
Okay, let's just see if there are any colleagues who would like to add something before we move on.
So I just want to add the questions asked are general in nature. In other words, it's difficult. So what's important? What I just realized, it's important the way that you frame your question. What questions do you ask about the data? Because the data is not it's raw data, so it's not showing exactly whether. So the question is not showing exactly what you want to know. Is it in terms of the specific lecturers, or is it in terms of the lecturing in general? Because the students' concerns are mentioned in terms of specific lecturers. So it's important. I just realized how important it is to ask the right question from the data, because that will clarify a lot of what you're going to filter and what you're going to put in the pivot tables, etc. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Rasi.
Can I also, just because Rasi raised it, just comment on something quickly? And that has to do, Rasi, you spoke about asking the right questions of the data, but to my mind, even a step before that, we really need to be, or need conceptual clarity when we ask things. So if I look at the column lecturer rating, I'm not entirely sure how that score is calculated, and based on what the questions are asked of students. If the question is simply rate your lecturer, from my perspective, it becomes very difficult to figure out what exactly is it that the students are rating. Are they rating the lecturer's ability to teach? Are they rating the lecturer's personality? Are they rating the lecturer's communication skills? So along with that issue that Rasi raised about asking the right questions of the data, I'm a firm believer that our instrumentation needs to be absolutely clear. Otherwise, we are liable to make incorrect inferences from the data.
I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thank you for that. So the design of how you're actually structuring these evaluations is an extremely important aspect of the sort of data that you're trying to get out. So having a very clear process as to how you structure that evaluation will ensure that you actually get out the sort of information that you need to actually make actionable or data-driven decision making based on those. So thank you for that. I think we can have, how many minutes do we have left? 10 minutes. I think we have time for another group.
When are we getting comfort break?
In 10 minutes.
Okay.
So just one final group to take us through, hopefully a group that answered all of the questions. Can we please have that? Oh, okay. Um, Celine, sorry to put you on the spot like that.
No, it's fine. I think Graham has a couple of quotes. I think we didn't get to answer all the questions, but we did identify some of the low rated comments, moderately rated comments, and high rated comments. So Graham, I'm not sure if you would share some of those. We unfortunately didn't get to actionable steps. So I don't think our group is best placed to give you that update. But yeah.
Yeah, quite right, Celine. We didn't, answer all three of these questions, but we were able to identify, three comments in each of the categories. And it seems that the comments have less to do with how the lecturer teaches or what the lecturer can do to even improve on their teaching and more about them as a person. So often students refer to the physical attributes of the lecturer. In other words, one referred to the lecturer as Maxtimi. The others would refer to, the stories they tell and some of the anecdotal aspects of teaching and learning, I suppose, that came into play in the module, but very little about how the course should be managed differently or structured differently to accommodate different students of different levels and so on. But that's just it in terms of the comments that were given by students, in the that open-ended section. But my concern, and maybe, this does to some extent link into what Gert was saying about, you need to know about what you want to ask of your data, or, what you're trying to ultimately gain from something like this. When I looked at the difficulty ratings, as per I think it was the second slide that we needed to do, the third visualization, students are as likely to say that the course was, easy or at a difficulty rating of 1, 2, or 3. They were equally likely to select one of those scoring options, and less likely to select a 4 and a 5, which to me suggests that there is some redundant information in 1, 2, and 3, because what would separate a student, in terms of scoring 1, a 2, or a 3? Yeah, it didn't make sense to me, the scoring system. And maybe what you might want to use for something like this are the kind of analytical procedures you would do as part of item response theory development to identify which scoring option would be best, as opposed to having all three in place. Yeah, just I know that's vague, but that did jump out at me as being quite unuseful, if I may put it that way.
So essentially, it's hard to see the relationship between the scoring of the difficulty rating and the student rating of the lecturer.
That as well, indeed.
Okay. All right, colleagues. Yeah,
Sorry,
we've gotten some. Yes.
Sorry, can I just, because again, Graham raised it, and I know we at the moment of taking a comfort break, we didn't get round to correlating the data properly, but just at a first glance, when I looked at I think we looked at the English one, at the lower lecturer ratings, and how that correlates with difficulty ratings, it does seem to me that the lower the lecturer is rated, the more likely the difficulty rating will be high. I mean, somebody who did a more in-depth analysis can correct me if I'm wrong. But if I'm not wrong, then that begs the question to my mind, about how to interpret all of this. Do we look at this and say students who experience the course as difficult are more likely to give the lecturer or the teacher a lower rating? Or do we say students who rate the teacher low are more likely to find this a more difficult course? So it's just a question I had.
Okay. Yeah, colleagues, I'm sure you're wondering why I'm not really answering any of those questions, and that's on purpose. So just one thing to mention. The data that I did share with you was just filtered out for 3 courses. But if you were to look at the full data set, it has, I think, 8,000 something courses. So even though it's a really small sample of the original data set, so you're not able to see the full scope of it. The reason for that being that we had to constrain it so that we can get through the exercise in time. But those questions that you asked regarding, for instance, I think the most important feedback was what, like he said, regarding the teaching styles, the workload, the expectations. What you're trying to determine is there is a specific rating given for a specific professor for a specific class. Then there's the comment which can give you some insights into why that rating actually was given. So the goal here is to, what sort of insights can we glean from the comments to actually tell us what is causing that rating to go down? And if we're able to identify things which are consistent from one student to the next, then we would have actually come across an important insight. So I'd just like you to keep that in mind. I think if there are no questions or any other comments, I think we can take the comfort break now and come back at 10:55.
Okay, thank you.
I think my screen should be visible.
Yes, it is.
Right, thank you. Okay, so sorry, just give me a second. Okay. Actually, I need to go to the previous slide. Okay, so it's 11 now, so we're a little bit behind schedule. We'll see if we're able to catch up. But what's left for the rest of the day is we'll be going through the tools, the techniques and tools for data-driven analysis. I'm keeping it to maybe 5 techniques, 4 or 5 techniques, and just one tool, which is the orange tool. I will go through the setup shortly. But the reason for the just keeping it to 5 techniques, we have a time constraint, and I think these are the ones which you're able to get maybe the most amount of how do you say, impact from the analysis, and then I guess the rest maybe the colleagues will look into at a later stage. So we're going to be covering 5 techniques. We'll be using one tool, and we'll be trying to get some insights into the data that we're using. Then we're going to have a second breakout session. We're going to follow the same process, but the difference now is you won't be using Excel. You'll be using this tool that I will be introducing you to shortly. And then you'll be trying to just apply some of the techniques in that tool. The reason the tool was chosen, it's free to use, and it's a visual. It's a visual. There's no coding involved, so that's why that was mainly used. But free tools do have their cons essentially. So, but you'll come across that as you use the tool, and then you'll be able to note exactly what's happening. For these types of things, you do need more robust paid for tools, or in order to do the same analysis without paying for a tool, then you'd have to pay for someone with the skills to actually do that analysis, which might actually be cheaper overall. But we can get into that a little bit later. Then we have the feedback session where we'll just get some feedback on how the groups are able to go through the exercise. And then I'm hoping in the last 20 minutes we'll be able to cover an evaluation informed data-driven framework. If we're not able to get to this, then probably I will be sending some documentation afterwards. Okay. So next session is techniques and tools for data-driven analysis. So we'll be going through 5 core techniques using Orange. That's the name of the tool. It is a text mining tool, and it's free to use software or open source, as is the usual term. We'll take examples from the course evaluation data. We'll be using the same constrained data set and not the full data set. The reason being is when you're using tools like this, it does consume quite a large amount of resources on your computer. So for this instance, we just need to constrain the data so that we're able to implement the techniques and get the outcomes out in a short amount of time. Then for each technique that I'll be introducing, I'll be showing you how it's actually done on the tool itself. So at least you're seeing me do it. And hopefully it won't be too much of an impediment when you're actually doing it by yourselves in the groups. But I do have instructions for that. And then we'll try to see if we're able to extract some insights from this data. Okay, so before we move on to the tools overview, the one that we're using for this session is called Orange. And I would just like colleagues to take some time to try and download it quickly so that at least whilst we're going through the rest of the presentation, you are able to have this installed on your system. I'm going to share the link in the chat. So what you do is you just go to this website, and then you will see that you're able to download a specific version for your machine. So if you're using Windows, then you will see the Windows option. If you're using a MacBook, then there's also a Mac option for that as well. So I've sent the link in the chat. Just click on it and then go to download Orange here. Actually, let me just share with everyone. Okay, so if you open the link, then it takes you here. Data mining, fruitful and fun. It's Orange data mining. You'll go to download Orange. And then you can see the options for the platforms. You have a Windows platform, then you have the Mac OS. So the one that I downloaded is this one, the standalone installer, because you can just click on that one and then it does the installation for you. And then if you're running Mac, then you can install it from here. So just download that and then install it. So I'll just give you 2 minutes to do that, and then we'll just go on with the rest of the presentation whilst the tool is installing in the background on your side. Just 1 more minute. Okay, so we're installing this tool, and then a little bit later on, I'll just show you this part because you have to install this specific widget for the techniques that we'll be using here. It's called text mining, and then we'll just do it a bit later because now we're just waiting for the install to finish. We'll be using a CSV file in this instance because Orange, it seems to only accept CSV files. I couldn't find an import for Excel, so I'll share the CSV as well. Then we will be building the workflow visually. So you'll be able to select from, you'll have a selection of different nodes that you can choose from, and then you're able to drag and drop into the canvas, and then it does what it says on the label. Okay, so let's just go through some of the tools that are available. I think that's something that a lot of colleagues are interested in. The one that we're using for today is called Orange. It's a desktop application. It's free to use. There's no coding involved. And then it is able to handle large amounts of data, but be aware that you do have to have a computer that's able to run these techniques and not crash. So it needs a moderate to a powerful computer to use. And then we're using it for our workshop today. This one is visual based. Then you have Nime, which is a personal favorite of mine. I use it for literally everything data analysis, data transformation related. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool. It does have a little bit of a steep learning curve, but it's also a visual tool. So it's not so hard to actually get started with it and to actually get some insights out of the data that you're analyzing. It's also a desktop application, and it's also free to use. The paid for version, it's very expensive, and this is the one that you can run on a server, and then you can run your workflows, but it's extremely, extremely expensive, prohibitively expensive actually. So just the top desktop application is fine. There is a little bit of coding. It's nothing hectic at all. Um, it's actually quite simple, but yeah, it can handle large amounts of data. It's quite good at this as well. It will, I don't think it really slows down your computer. It's quite efficient at actually managing its resources. So this one doesn't sort of disturb your resource usage too much. And then it's not really suitable for a workshop like this one because there's so many options when it comes to Nime. It can literally do anything and everything when it comes to data analysis. But this is my preferred application when it comes to data analysis. Then there are some others which we won't really go into too much detail with. We have the Voyant tools. This one is web-based. It's not able to really handle large amounts of data, and then it's good for exploratory data analysis. RapidMiner is another one, but this one is a bit more complex. I think this one actually uses Python in the background, if I'm not mistaken. It's actually, I believe it's a Python library as well as a desktop application. So you can actually, if you are comfortable with using a programming language like Python, you can access these libraries, which actually have pre-trained models that you can use on your data, which is a game changer because you don't have to sit there and train a model yourself. Meaning Cloud is a web-based API. You do it in the web. Yeah. Then you have Hugging Face as well. This is similar to RapidMiner. You get specific applications which people have developed, and then they can do different things. It has a huge catalog of things that it can do. You go onto the Hugging Face website, and you can literally see different apps and models, and they tell you what they do and how you use them. So there are pre-trained models here. When you talk about pre-trained model, we're referring to machine learning models because with machine learning, you have to train a model to do something. But in Hugging Face, these are pre-trained, meaning someone else has done the majority of the work for you. You can literally just take that and use it yourself and get the output and then move on with your life. So Hugging Face, my preferred ones, again, it's Hugging Face and then Nime as well. But in terms of what we'll be doing today, we'll be using Orange. Okay, so the first technique that we'll be going through is called sentiment analysis. One of the colleagues mentioned it earlier in the first session. Sentiment analysis, what it does is it helps us answer how do students feel about the experience by classifying something, a comment in this case, as positive, negative, or neutral. You can take it a bit further with other tools, not this one, and sort of have more categories in terms of how positive it is or how negative it is, the degree to which it is negative, the degree to which it is positive. But essentially, the main gist of it is that you're getting feedback as to saying that this comment is positive, this comment is negative, or this comment is neutral. So it reveals the emotional tone of the student's comments. So at least it gives you a little bit of a warning before you look at a comment, okay, this is negative. Because sometimes they just jump out at you like, oh, that student is very rude. So for instance, let's say you have a comment saying the lectures were too fast. This is something that would be classified as negative. Obviously, this depends. One thing you have to note when you're using these techniques are very, very important. Some of them are very accurate and some of them are not so accurate. So when you use this one, you'll be able to judge for yourself how accurate it is because you'll be able to see a comment and then see if its classification is actually justified by that specific technique. Okay. So I'll just do a quick demonstration. But before I do this, I want us to go back to, I'm assuming you're done downloading. So I just want us to do this bit here where we're installing the text mining for Orange, and then we can move on. So just give me a minute, colleagues. Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit faint. Okay, that's not gonna work. Colleagues, I hope you can, let me try and just zoom a bit and see if it makes things better. Okay, I think maybe this works for stuff that's on the canvas, but essentially when you open the Orange application, this is what it looks like. You have these tabs here for the different things that you can do. You have the data tab where you can actually import the CSV, for instance, and then you have something like data table, which allows you to view a data set from a specific output. Then you also have things like transform. You have select columns here. Let's say you have a table that has multiple columns. Then you can select which columns you want to take forward, you want to use going forward. So these are just the different tabs. Mine already has text mining installed here, but when you open yours, you shouldn't be able to see something like this. So what you do is you go to widget, and then you go to open. Oh, no, actually you go to options, sorry. You go to options and then you go to add-ons. And then you look for a specific one called text here. And then you just select it and then go OK or install, whatever shows up. And then it should start installing. I think it'll take a bit of time on your side, but in the meantime, we can move on. Okay, so this is installing. Then let's go on to implementing this actual technique. So we're going to do a sentiment analysis on the data that we have from the Rate My Professor dataset. So let's just go back to our tool here. So firstly, we want to import the data into the tool. So the first thing you do is that you go to data and then you say CSV file import. This is what shows up on the canvas, and it allows you to actually choose a file from your folders that you can import. So you double click on it, then you go to the folder option here. So my file is in my desktop. It's the Rate My Professor data. Make sure that you choose the CSV file and not the Excel file. And then you just import that data into the tool. So it gives you a little bit of a preview of what it looks like. You have the specific columns, you're familiar with these already. And then just be careful here when it comes to the cell delimiter. This tells us how it actually separates the different columns. Mine is semicolon, but yours might be something different. So for instance, if yours is a comma, just check how this looks first before moving forward, because it's not.
Thakatau, sorry, can you make it a little bit larger, please?
Let me just, okay.
Yeah, especially that when the active window that you're working in.
Let me try 150.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, it's a little bit difficult to actually see what's happening. Okay. So as I was saying, be careful here of the cell delimiter. So for instance, you see if yours is defaulted to column, just look at what your data looks like and make sure that this one is not separated properly into different columns. So that's a problem. Just make sure that you select a delimiter which puts it into the correct columns. So once you're done with that, just say okay. And then it should load into the tool. You don't have to reload. You can just check. There's a small button here where you can view what the data looks like. And then when you open that, oopsie, it'll show you that this is what the data looks like. Okay. Then just to close this, you just click on an empty space and then it closes. Okay, so next step. So for us to actually, we want to isolate this data into just the columns. So you'll come here to the transform tab, and then you will select columns. Then this node will show up here. You link this, you just click on this and then you drag it, and then it should link for you. You let that go, then that's the link. In select columns, you click twice to open that node, then this is what it looks like. So our data has the course code, the lecture rating, and the student difficulty rating. There's also this one here at the bottom called matters, which is comments. What you need to do is select these and then just put them under the ignored section because we won't be using them. And then you just leave this one where it is. Okay, and this is not ticked for you, then just make sure that it's sent automatically. Then we just look at what the data looks like. Then you can see that the comments are here. We just have the columns, the comments. Okay. Then the next step is if we want to do any of the text mining stuff, once your widget is done downloading, you should see this. I think it asks you to restart first once it's done, and then you should see this tab available afterwards called text mining. So you just come here. Before we can actually this is the sentiment analysis node. But before we can actually use this one, we need to convert our comments into a corpus. So this is just the format that Orange is able to use this data as. For some reason, I'm not too sure about the details, but we have to change this into a corpus, and then we can basically use all of the other nodes available to us. So you click on that, and then you connect again. Then you open this, double click, and just make sure that comments actually shows up under the used text features. And then also for the title variable, you can just click on the drop down and then select comments. So it's done, and then you can see there's 240 instances, and then there's one variable, which is the comment. So it's done, it's changed it into a corpus, and now we can use it for sentiment analysis and then the other techniques as well. So let's go to sentiment analysis. It's also in this tab here for text mining. You just click on it. Oops. And then you link the corpus. Actually, I think no, there's another step before this one. Apologies. Before we implement sentiment analysis, we need to pre-process the text. So yeah, I need to look for the pre-processing node, which is this one. And then I'll explain what this does just now, whilst actually looking at the options available. So just connect the corpus to the pre-processing text. And then this does a couple of things, because the text right now you saw there can be different sort of characters inside the text. They can be the texts are lowercase and uppercase, which is fine if you're reading it as a human being because all of that makes sense to you. But in order to actually get the techniques or the nodes here to work with these comments properly, we have to do a couple of transformations. The first one is...
Sorry, Thakatau, just a quick question because it was a good one. What is the undo? How do you undo or go back? So for example, what you just did, where's the undo or go back feature?
Okay, so for instance, you have this, you can just close it, and then because it's node-based, you can just delete this.
Okay.
Because the other one was a node that I hadn't put there.
Yeah.
So you can just remove it. But then once you've edited something inside here, you can't undo it. You have to close it and then open it again to actually change stuff inside.
Okay, all right. No, because I'm just querying it. It was a good question in the chat that you wanted to go back and pre-process, and yeah, thank you.
Okay. I didn't test the Control Z and the undo and the redo. I'm not sure about those. Like if you had delete, actually let's check. Can just remove that. Then Control Z. Yeah, so if you had deleted something, you can bring it back. And then I'm sure it works the other way around. Okay, so like I was saying, the pre-processed text, then we have to do a couple of things here. You double click to open it. We're going to make sure that all of the words are lowercase, just to make it easier for the techniques to differentiate out certain things. You can also remove accents. And then when it comes to the tokenization is when you literally separate out each word to sort of how do I say? You have a full comment that has been typed by the student. Tokenization is when you literally separate out each of those words so that it's analyzed individually by the technique that you'll be using. So this is just the main purpose of this is to remove words that don't actually add any meaning to the comments if you're looking at it for instance, for a sentiment analysis, it'll remove like those common words, like and or they or whatever, those sort of words. We have to tokenize it first so that we can remove those words. So that's what we're doing here. And then when it comes to filtering, you select stop words and select this one as well. And you can see what it's removing here because it's looking at all of these as options and then just taking it out of the text. And then there's one last step here, which is normalization. So you double click it. It does take some time a little bit of time to actually show up here. But it pops up here at the bottom. So this is called normalization, or you can just refer to the definition here for lemmatizer. You just select the word, not lemmatizer. And essentially what lemmatization is, it'll take a word in a specific form and then it converts it to its basic form. For example, like if you have a word like running, it'll take it and convert it to its basic form, which is run. So the reason is that you have consistency amongst your entire corpus where words are all in their basic form. So if something is appearing multiple times in other comments, then it's easy to see that as opposed to having something like running, then when you're analyzing it, you have running here, you have run there. So that's how that works. Okay, so just make sure that these are all in place. This is the most important step actually before you go on with the sentiment analysis, but that's fine. So this is working, and then you can just close this. So we have our preprocessed text, and now we can actually move on to the sentiment analysis. So over here, I click it, and then I just link the sentiment analysis to the node. For this one, just the method, just pick this method for Veda. I think it gives out the output that's easier to understand. You can play around with these maybe. So what you do is you just select a method and then you analyze the output to see if it's in a way that you can understand. When I was playing around with this, I'm not really sure as to the background of how it works, but it gives the output in a manner that's easier to interpret than all of the other ones. So you just select Veda, and then now we want to see what the text looks like because the sentiment analysis is essentially done. So this is the last step. You go to data again, and then you go to data table. Okay, so now we can open up and see what the sentiment analysis looks like. And this is essentially what the output looks like. Okay, you have your positive component, your negative component, and your neutral component. So just focus on this one because this is how it gives an output. It's not a straightforward classification. It gives you a number between -1 and 1. So it's a decimal number between -1 and 1. Yes, Herman?
So just to quickly check with you with regards to the accuracy and the usefulness of this sentiment analysis approach. If you look at row number 7 on your analysis, it's more positive than negative and it's most neutral, but if you actually read the comment, it is an extremely negative statement. Usually with something like sentiment analysis, I would use it as a first step before actually reading the comments and classifying them. But I'm just wondering with your steps in using these types of tools, how you would treat something like that type of record if you find it.
Yeah, in terms of the accuracy of this tool, yeah, I did mention it a bit before, but I didn't really go into detail. But you will notice this is not the only occurrence where there's this sort of discrepancy. So basically what it means, we're looking at the compound for the rest of the colleagues, because I hadn't gotten there yet. We have the compound column, and it's a number between -1 and +1. And this gives you an indication of how negative the comment is and how positive the comment is according to the model. The closer to -1 that the number is, the more negative it's perceived by the model. And then the closer to +1, then the more positive it's perceived by the model. So in this case that Herman has just pointed out, you can see that this is actually quite a negative comment, but the model has sort of given out a number that would indicate that it's a positive comment, which tells you you're not going to get something that's 100% accurate with something like this tool or perhaps this method. That is something that you have to be aware of when you're using tools like this one. Personally, if I'm doing a sentiment analysis, I would be doing it via Python, and I would be using a method that is more robust than this one. And different methods will give you different accuracies depending on how you're using them. But yeah, you will see when you're doing the analysis yourself that some of these comments, yeah, the model is not really that accurate. Okay. Maybe we can, let's see. This one would be a little bit, would be positive as well. For instance, column 16, let's see what it says. Have fun in Moodle. Okay. Yeah, so this would, what the sentiment analysis would look like. Then something you could do post this, because now you have the comments and then you have the compound. You can write a little bit of a, or even let's say you've gotten this output in Excel, then you can just write a piece of DEX code where you're saying you define a cutoff for negative, you define a cutoff for positive, and then you define a cutoff for neutral so that you can actually get the specific category for positive, neutral, and negative. But I think for the purposes of this workshop, we'll just leave it here for now. Given that it's not so accurate, what advice would you give for those of us not versed in coding? You can, like I was saying before, there's colleagues, at some point there is a level of learning that will need to be done if you're going to use some of these tools. The free ones, they're not that reliable, hence why they're free. But something like Nime, for instance, it does have a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not so difficult to actually get up and running with it because it's similar to this. Let me see if I can actually show you what it looks like for those of you who haven't seen it. So if you want something that's more accurate, you will need to use a tool that's better at doing this sort of thing, that has a larger variety of models than just Orange at the moment. This one we're just using because, yeah, it gives us a picture of what we're trying to accomplish. But as for accuracy, you need something more robust. As for, how do I say, Melekaya, double check your results manually. Yeah, we're trying to run away from doing things manually because sometimes you have thousands and thousands of evaluations that you're trying to get through. So it's best to actually use a tool. Okay, so I'll just show you what it looks like, but this is by no means any sort of tutorial. But what I wanted to show you is that it's also a visual tool where you can actually put a node that does a very specific function. So for instance, you can have data. This is instances for our LMS data. Colleagues, I can't open this, I'm sorry. It is confidential data. But this is our Ulwazi data. It's showing the learning management system logins of the students. You can do group buys. This is a very large data set, by the way. NIME handles it without any issues. You can do group buys. You can string manipulate, rename columns. But then you also have other, I'm sure this is also tiny, but you also have other, I'm trying to zoom into the bottom here because this is where you see the type of things you can do here. You have analytics, for instance. You have the mining, which is part of what we're doing. You have different types of models. Some of these can give you really good accuracies on terms like sentiment analysis. You have statistics. Very, very comprehensive selection here. And on top of this, you can get more because this is a tool that a lot of people use. So there is a lot of content out there. So this is another option if you're looking into that. So let's go back to our free to use, not so accurate orange in terms of the sentiment analysis. So you do it this way. And I think we should stop here. But essentially what I would do from here, let's say I export this data out into Excel. Like I was saying, I would just write a simple DEX script that says, these are my cutoffs for positive, these are my cutoffs for neutral, and these are my cutoffs for negative. But for now, you'll have to do it sort of manually. Okay, any questions, colleagues? Let's see. Herman said sometimes the paid for and free versions use the same basic libraries for something like sentiment analysis. I'm not sure that the paid version would necessarily be the answer. Also, for the SA second language aspect matters quite a lot. That is true. Some of these do have language translation as well.
Sorry, just to quickly chip in on my comment there. The language translation won't matter as much, since our students use English, they just use it sometimes in a broken way. So because it's our second, third, or fourth language or more, our articulation of it isn't necessarily the same that the sentiment analysis would expect. And since sentiment analysis sort of works the same everywhere, if someone went and said this word is positive, this word is negative, and it sort of depends on which one of those libraries you're using or how that was developed, that sort of depends on how it gets scored. That's my baseline issue with sentiment analysis, is it's very basic, but it's at least very quick as well. I'm not sure how you handle sort of those instances. I'd sort of be curious to know how you apply it and which versions of the models you use, that you mentioned previously.
Okay, Herman from UP. So you're saying that from your evaluation data, you're basically getting comments which are a mixture of different languages.
No, I'm saying that because the English is our students' second language is sort of everywhere. It's an issue that we all have. Getting a sentiment analysis library that gets developed in a primarily English space may or may not work, because something like sentiment analysis can't recognize sarcasm or irony or any of those sort of linguistic terms. And because English is our student's second language, they sometimes use a broken version of it. They don't necessarily use the words in their originally intended meaning, but uses it how we in South Africa have learned a particular critique is given.
And then, so how have you tackled this with your data specifically?
That's where I'm very fortunate in not being directly involved in the textual data on our side, at the moment at least. But I am curious in how you're handling that kind of situation, or if there's colleagues who have that kind of experience and how they deal with it.
Okay, I see Graham has something to say. Graham, please go ahead.
Hey, Thakatau, I must say this is very interesting and it's nice to see a tool like Orange in action. I just also want to maybe declare my reservations about relying on sentiment analysis without triangulation, meaning that you would have to supplement this sort of analysis with other text-based analysis to really sort of arrive at a deeper understanding of what the data is telling you. So one of the basic features of South African English, and this is something that I think is influenced by Afrikaans as a language. Afrikaans is notorious for having a double negative in its basic sentence constructions, such as if I can just say an Afrikaans sentence, moenie orange gebruik nie. So it emphasizes the negative twice in the sentence. And to some extent, this is rubbed off onto how we use language generally in South Africa. So if you were to ask a student, how would you describe the difficulty of a course? You might often get responses like, it wasn't that bad, which is, again, re-emphasizing the double negative. And I think if you want to do something like sentiment analysis, you kind of have to treat the results with skepticism as a result of that. And I would always recommend, as far as possible, to view language in context so that whatever negativity is identified or included as part of an analysis, such as a sentiment analysis, that you ultimately look at it within context. And in this regard, I would say concordance analysis, which is also a corpus methodology, is in my view, the far superior way of looking at this, because it shows how negative words are used in relation to other words within the corpus. And that will, to some extent, contextualize the negativity better than simply giving it a measure, which is, I think, what the sentiment analysis sort of stops at. However, I don't think that we currently have the analytical ability to look at language conclusively when we are studying either negative or positive sentiments. And of course, there are other sentiments as well, and not only negative and positive. I think there are a wide variety of sentiments that we can analyze within a language. But my view is always that if we are looking at text-based data, that we should view it as much as possible in context as a way of illuminating what the statistics are telling us.
Okay. Thank you for that, Graham. And I'm curious to know how many of the colleagues use tools like ChatGPT or Gemini from Google or DeepSeek. Can I just get a show of hands?
Do you mean by way of analyzing data?
Just on a day-to-day basis for any sort of task. Because those, okay, let me just get a show of hands and then I'll make my point afterwards. Okay, not a lot. Just about 9 people at most that I saw with the hands raised. So, Graham, I'm not sure if you have experience with this. Do you use Python by any chance?
So no, I don't use Python. I do work a lot with R though. So I've done
Okay.
my, whatever sort of text-based analysis I've done via R.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, although not really an objective of this workshop, you have really, really great pre-trained LLMs which can maybe not so much for the mixed language usage and whatnot, but you have pre-trained LLMs which you can use within your Python code. I'm not sure about R, I don't really use it, but you can use within your Python code, and it can do something like sentiment analysis to a very high degree of accuracy. So you would import a model into your Python, and then you would give it specific instructions to go through all of this data and do this specific thing. So essentially, an LLM can actually replace all of these techniques all at once, and you wouldn't have to sit there. You'd have to sit there and wait for it to finish because a lot of these are large are really quite large and they take a lot of processing power, but it can literally go through all of this and give you very, very accurate outputs as to if something is negative, to what degree it's negative, what it's actually pointing towards that's causing it to be negative. Very, very robust, very, very accurate. I think maybe what we can do going forward for the techniques who are up to par in terms of Python or R and stuff like that, we can have another workshop where I can actually show you all exactly how you can use these really, really powerful models out there to do the sort of analysis, because we're not constrained. These are quite how do I say, antiquated, which is a strange thing to say because, but anyway, it's been moving so fast in terms of the development of these models and whatnot. But these are they're a little bit behind, and you can use these large language models to get really, really, really good outputs. So I'll talk to Ashton about that and see what we can do. But yeah, so they're still quite basic, but yeah, so in terms of sentiment analysis, that's the stuff you can get out. You can look at a comment and sort of give it a category as to whether it's positive or negative. I think we might be slightly behind schedule. Let me just check. 10:50. Whoa. Okay, we're really behind schedule. Okay, let's move on. I'll try to cover the rest of the techniques and then, okay. So we're done with sentiment analysis. You've seen how it works in terms of the orange tool. Now we can go to the keyword extraction. So keyword extraction is basically, sorry, keyword extraction. So it extracts the most relevant words from the phrases or comments. So you're trying to get a little bit of a nuanced look into what those words which are causing that sentiment to be extracted mean. So this extract the most relevant words or phrases from the comments. You can identify recurring issues or topics quickly, which is part of the process we took when we were pre-processing our text so that we can get the basic or the first iteration of the word so that you can see across comments what pops out. An example of this, you could have too many quizzes and vague instructions. This would be a negative comment clearly. And then you would extract keywords like quizzes and instructions. So you'd have your sentiment, let's say it says it's a negative comment, and then you would have things like quizzes and instructions pointing towards what that comment is actually talking about. Okay. So this gives you a little bit of a deeper look into the comment. I'm just going to quickly go to okay, so for this instance, sorry, I just need to check something quickly. Where's my PowerPoint? Okay, that's fine. We've already set this up properly, so I think what we can do is, let me try and zoom in. So we have our corpus and we have our pre-processed text. We can just move on to something like, I think we can start with the bag of words. Okay, so we have the extract keywords node here, and we just need to link it to our corpus. Let's just try and take it directly from the sentiment analysis and see if that works. Otherwise, we'll have to take it from the pre. Okay, let me check this out. What did it complain about? Okay, colleagues, I'm not well versed enough in this tool to figure this out. I think what we can do is rather go for the bag of words model instead of this one, and it should give us an indication of what the keywords are. So you can just go to the tabs here and search for the specific node that you're looking for. And then you get the bag of words. You click on that. And then let's just link this back to our corpus from the pre-processed text. So the term frequency is just counting the frequency. The document frequency, if I remember correctly, this, if you select IDF, it sort of minimizes the amount of words that it's actually counting, because some words are more important than others. So this is just a way of minimizing how many words are actually coming through. But let's leave this unselected for now and just do the term frequency and see what it gives out. Oh, we need the data table to see the data. Okay. Let me. Okay. As you can see, this one is it's very large. I'm gonna try to make this a bit more visible. I'm sorry, colleagues, it's actually quite difficult to show this properly while zooming in and zooming out. Let's stick to a comment. This one, I don't know. Let's try to find a bit of a shorter one. Okay, and zoom in a bit. So gave out credits. I thought she was pretty. Students. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what this specific model does, it's identifying things that could be considered keywords. Some are more relevant than others. So for instance, it's counting the number of keywords that are appearing here. There's word like credit, which is appearing once. Credit thought, that's from the previous pre-processing text where we allowed up to two words together. Not very useful. There's love psychology. This one could be slightly useful. There's pretty easy. Oh, okay. Pretty easy. Let's look at another one maybe. So this is essentially stuff it's extracting out as keywords. Also not quite, there's too many things here which don't make sense. So also not quite accurate, but maybe let's see another comment and see if there's something maybe more relevant. So we have this comment here which says, he gives 10 bonus points every chest plus extra credit constantly. You don't have to show up. But if you do, you'll get the extra credit. Constantly tells nutty stories. So let's zoom in a bit to see the keywords. There's bonus, which is counted once, 10 bonus. Constantly, a credit constantly, not very useful, but this credit here, we had credit show up in some other comment as well. And then every test, not very useful. So you can see it is extracting out some things. This is not a very good extraction, but you do get some sort of output from this. This one, I don't think it's quite useful, to be quite honest, because it's just too many words. It's too many words. But ideally, what should be happening is it's taking out the really important topics. For instance, had to go to his office hours. Okay, I'm not really sure what you can get out from there. Let's go for his lectures are great. Great lectures. That could be a keyword that I'd be looking for. Detailed lecture notes. Perhaps if you had 3 words, that would be good as well. Or even just lecture notes. Does its best to help students. So that would be the keywords that I'd be looking for. I think something a bit more accurate would get out those keywords. But here you see best help, Blackboard, detailed. Well, this detailed lecture. And yeah. So that's what it looks like in terms of Orange. Are there any questions, colleagues, for this section? Let me see in the chats. Orange seems complicated and not user-friendly as opposed to Atlas TI. Okay. What do you use Atlas for, Hlengiwe? If you don't mind. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
For instance, for sentiment analysis and connecting the sentiments, and I don't know, perhaps it's just the familiarity of the tool. I find it more user-friendly for me.
And
But
is
it
it
struggles with a lot of data though. Perhaps it's my computer capability. Like if I were to put institutional data, it struggles a lot.
I see. And then is this tool that you use, is it free to use or is it paid for? Could you maybe include a link for the other colleagues who might be?
Fortunately for us, we have a university license.
Okay.
The university pays, so you just write to IT to include you as a subscriber.
Okay. Yeah, money always helps. Money for licenses always helps. Colleagues, let's see where we are in terms of the content. Oh, we've actually eaten into breakout time. Okay, but it's fine. Custom classification, I think maybe let me skip this one for now, because this one is a little bit more complex. You can basically give classifications to Orange, and then let's say you've sorted out your classifications that you want to check for. In this instance, you would have something like workload and maybe clarity regarding the content, like the lecture content. So you would put this in and then you would update Orange itself to say these are the classifications that I'm looking for. See if you can actually extract them out. This might be a bit more useful than the keywords, but it's a bit more complicated to do this in Orange. I think for now we'll just skip it so that we do something a bit easier and that you can do in the exercise as well. But I will include documentation for this as well so that you can do it yourself. Let's go for topic modeling. Automatically assigns high-level topics, clusters feedback into broad institutional categories. So if you have something like couldn't navigate the LMS, then it would classify this as a technology. So in terms of Orange's topic modeling widget, it's based on LDA, which is legit derelict allocation, if I'm not mistaken. So we can discover hidden themes in the feedback data. Each topic is characterized by its top keywords. And then this technique is ideal when we don't have predefined categories. So in the custom classification one, the one we didn't cover, you would have predefined categories that you're looking for. But here you would say, okay, I don't know anything about this data. Please define these categories for me. And we will see what sort of output that we get out. Okay. What am I looking for again? Topic modeling. Okay, so this one is a little bit easier. You can see it right here. Colleagues, there's someone whose mic is open. Oh, let me just mute. Okay. Then you would take it from the pre-processed text. So what I did, colleagues, just so that you're not confused, I went to the text mining tab. Then I selected the topic modeling option here.
Thakatau, sorry, it's Ku. I'm just coming in here. I know you had planned another breakout session where colleagues would work on a task, but I'm wondering whether it might be more useful for you to actually model the task for all of us, you know, in plenary. We've been having some really good discussion, I think, in questions and point raised in the chat. So I think it might actually be more beneficial rather than getting people to grapple with Orange if they haven't downloaded it or got the data set, or so I don't know. Just my thoughts. Colleagues, what do you think? What would be more useful for you?
I agree with you, Khadija.
Let me just say a show of hands if you'd prefer if we just do it all here. Yes, I'm waiting for 20 hands raised at minimum. Okay, so it's 20. All right. Okay, that's fine then. So let's try and do it all here together.
Thanks, Thakatau. Thanks, colleagues.
Okay. So let's see what sort of topics we have gotten out from our comments. So it's given us 15 distinct categories of these topics. Let's see what they say. So the first one is canceled class, feedback paper, stray away. No idea what that means. Okay, cancel class feedback seems I don't know. How do you say? We're going somewhere with these ones. And then the second one is giving students something, probably related to work. Do you expect amount work, class 20. Paper grading, hardly work. Young student. This is related maybe to work content and related to paper. Okay. Maybe related to exams. Let's see the third one. Cancel class. This appeared here as well. Good English. Bad wake. Not really useful. Something Blackboard. Imagine take. Yeah, also not really useful here as well. Maybe let's go to the last one. Scale makes sense. Worst teacher related to the teacher. Horrible teacher. Class. Paper grading. That seems it should be related to this one more so. Okay, maybe these ones are not too useful. Let's maybe try to change the method of the modeling to see if maybe we see some improvements, hopefully. Okay, let's see what we get at now. So this one is the latent derelict allocation. Let's see what it says. More of the same with the something blackboard. Seems very repetitive here. Then we have cancelled class. Also not really good. Let's try another one and see. Let's say latent semantic indexing. Number of topics. So this one we can actually choose how many topics we want to see. Maybe let's leave it at 5 so that it tries to be a little bit more narrow with its focus, hopefully. Okay, so that's 10 topics. I want 5. Something blackboard again. Teacher avoid. Okay, still not really that great. Let's try the last one, which is the hierarchical derelict process. I haven't used this one, but it seems to want a lot of things. I'm not sure what the learning rates, these are parameters that you have to tune, but we're not going to go through this. Let's see if we can just get it to work. Okay, let's just wait for it a bit. It's done this a couple of times before, so this is not unusual.
May I quickly chip in quickly?
I'm not sure who that is, but go ahead, please.
Sorry, it's Harman. So this is a wonderful example of how the data exploration part of this entire thing works. And we're sort of experiencing the same difficulties that you are now, where you pitch up with one and it's not clear enough or it's too vague. And something like sentiment analysis or the bag of words techniques, for me, is usually a wonderful part to start this type of analysis, because it sort of pre-classifies the stuff into something that's roughly there but not quite accurate. But my next step would almost always be to suggest a manual approach after this. These kind of steps sort of saves days and or weeks worth of work, depending on how much data you work with. But then you sort of do need a human pair of eyes over almost everything to get actually something useful from this. I've never been able to see value in just having something like a word cloud or a sentiment analysis on its own that wasn't first classified by a person. And you mentioned earlier that using machine learning techniques would simplify a lot of this approach. I mean, a lot of us would have seen examples of what ChatGPT can do with this kind of data. But my problem remains that those techniques either miss too much of the data or you sit with too many hallucinations, and without a person going through it manually, you don't quite have the amount of trust in the system that you need to. I'm wondering if I'm just out of date because things changed last week, or if you found a different process that works better. But something like a word cloud has never, given me enough value from these kind of systems. And I'm wondering how other people sort of deal with the time constraints and or the techniques.
Okay, I think maybe we can get feedback from the other participants. But from my part, yes, I agree mostly with what you're saying regarding if you're using techniques like this, quite rudimentary, and you're trying to get a little bit of insight into it, but nothing too, it's not useful enough to actually try to get it to a point where you can make specific data-driven decisions based on the data that you're looking at. In terms of the hallucinations of the ChatGPT models or the LLM models, the hallucinations only happen if the difference between it hallucinating if you're giving it like an actual comment, there's very little hallucination when it comes to that, because hallucinations is when it's actually making up things which are not there. So if you'd asked it a question saying, I don't know, do red blood cells carry oxygen or something like that, and then it goes into a tangent talking about photosynthesis, that would be an example of an hallucination. You're asking it for an answer, but the difference here is that the answer is in the comment. You're saying, look at this comment and tell me what you get out of it. When that aspect, I have seen no hallucination whatsoever. It only happens when you're asking it something it has no reference to if there's data
Where
there.
where do you do this? Because the systems that I've used, it sometimes gives me an accurate enough summary, but when you get to the actual analyzed data where it gives it to you in a table format like these results are presented, there's only like 20% of the comments are actually considered in the analysis. The other 80% of the comments are ignored. There's nothing labeled to them. So even where the stuff is relatively accurate, it's throwing away either most of the data, and even then, it can still hallucinate by giving you a summary of something that doesn't exist. So I'm wondering which systems you use that has that level of accuracy.
So, so I did say I mainly use NIM and Python. So there is a Hugging Face model, which actually is quite good at basically, start with the sentiment analysis. I'd gotten survey data from a colleague in our quality and planning office, and I was able to do an extremely accurate sentiment classification given the model that I was using. I'll try to look for it. It's somewhere here, but what I can do, I think as part of the content package that I'm going to share after this, I will give colleagues, how do I put this? I'm not sure. Okay, here's what I'll do. I'll give you a data set that has this analysis, and I'll make sure that actually, I'll use this very data set to do that. I'll use this data set to actually do that analysis via that model that I was speaking about. And you'll be able to see with your own eyes the difference between the accuracy that you're getting with something like this, which is not so great, but it is free and you can demonstrate with it. And then something that is done in a more robust model that you've taken from somewhere else. You will see that the difference is actually quite remarkable. This is a free tool. This is what it's going to give us. I'm also not sure about the tools that you use in your organization specifically, in your institution. Could you just give us maybe a small breakdown? I remember someone saying that they use R. Is this the same person?
No, but we also very much depend on R to some extent for some of the text analysis stuff. Hlingeri already mentioned that we usually make use of something like Atlas TI. Some organizations might use in Vivo, and I'm curious to know how they've developed their automated coding type stuff. But I mean,
Okay.
for something like this, it's not it's easy to say, but for some institutions, it might be simple to pivot to a Python-based thing. So if your example includes that kind of stuff, it would be wonderful.
So you'd like the code as well?
If you're
Okay.
willing to share.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's this open data set and it's just an example showing how to use it. Our colleagues who are not able to use Python, I'll still include the input and the output, maybe in the form of visuals as well, so that you can just see what you can get out of this. But the Python, you have to know how to code in Python, so that would be the learning curve there. But if you do have a data team that's able to do that work, the purchase tools are very expensive. They're very, very expensive, and they're institutions which just simply don't have that amount of money to put towards something where you haven't really proven its effectiveness in doing certain things. For instance, if you're evaluating all of this data, how can you prove from an institutional level that this is actually worth, in theory, yes, but is the data that you're getting out really useful? You might need to go back and redesign your evaluations. But I'll put together that package so that at least you're able to see how accurate some of these models are, because it really is quite remarkable what you can get out these days. This is baby steps in comparison. So this is the last one that we've done, which is the the hierarchical derelict process. And as you can see, it's also still quite all over the place. But at this point, you're not really surprised. Classroom miserable, professor meticulous. Yeah. So this is what you'd be getting at. And this is for the topic modeling. I wonder if there was a simpler data set to use actually with more direct comments. But in truth, if you're getting open-ended questions, you're not going to get something that's clean and structured. That is the whole point of it. So yeah. Let me see what what's next. Colleagues, I actually wanted you all to experience these frustrations yourself with using this tool, but it's fine. We've gone through it together. But the final technique I wanted to show you was a sentiment and topic cross analysis, where now you're looking at the topic that you've derived from here, and then you're looking at the sentiment together, and then you're saying, okay, this specific topic seems to be the one that's driving the negative sentiment. But I think we've seen with our tool specifically that we're not really getting very accurate analysis from these. So I think what we can do from here, we can just have a short discussion. I can just show you what I wanted you to answer in the exercises, just so that you have an idea. And then I think we can take another break. Then we'll come back for the last portion, which is the framework that template that I have for the colleagues who've attended today. So I'm going to try and go to the Google Slides. Okay, so in terms of what we would have been doing in the session, we would essentially been looking at the data that we've got from the Rate My Professor dataset, and then we would have been deriving the sentiment of each comment in the dataset. This one we already did together. Extracting topics using the topic modeling node. This one we've already done. And then also find dominant topics in the negative comments. So this would have been the cross between the sentiment analysis and the topic modeling so that we can see what's actually driving the negative comments. Then the main question would be, based on your findings, what would be your recommendations to the course coordinator? So there were 3 courses given, which was English 101, Psychology 101, and Philosophy 101, I believe. So you would have chosen at random which course you wanted to do this for, and then you would have gotten out, well, you really wouldn't have gotten out these insights, but you would have gone through the process of trying to get out these insights and see what you're able to come up with. Okay, I think we can pause there, colleagues. Let me just check my program to see where we are.
We should have been coming back from, I think, breakaways now, Thakatau, and then leading you into the last half an hour.
Okay. I think we can take another 15-minute break, so we'll come back at 12:40. Is it 12:40?
Yeah, would you have enough time then for the last 20 minutes for the last segment?
It's not really that detailed. It's quite basic actually, but it's more of a template that colleagues can sort of have a takeaway from the session as to what they would need to cover in terms of getting a framework in place.
Okay, I think what I would suggest is perhaps instead of breaking, let's go on with the last session and then just open it up for just a general discussion because I think there's some really good discussion. I think the experience today is it's opened, a lot of people's eyes, the much more experienced people as well as the novices. So I think it'll open for some rich discussion. So my suggestion is let's just continue. And either finish a little bit earlier if there isn't further discussion, or let's use the rest of the time for discussion. Colleagues?
The break is also more for me.
Oh, I see. Okay, do you need
Yeah,
a 5? I get it.
I
Okay,
do.
not a problem.
Okay, so we'll come back at 12:40, colleagues, and then we'll just finish up with the last section here.
Okay.
Who's back? Let's see. 19 people. So far, 20 people. Let's just wait 2 more minutes. Just one more minute and then we'll start. Okay, it's 12:45 now. Can I just get an indication if my screen is visible?
It is.
All right. Okay, colleagues, so this is the last portion of the workshop. We'll just be going through some of the things you might want to keep in mind when you're going through a project where you're actually trying to get as much impact out of your evaluations as possible. Let me just start. Okay. So the first portion of this is to have a centralized data infrastructure or a database. I think this is something that some universities struggle with, but some do already have something like this in place. You have to ensure that you have a place where you're actually storing your evaluation data and it is being maintained to make sure that it's structured appropriately, it's up to date, and there are no errors when it comes to the data. Another useful aspect of having it stored in a central place is that you can actually integrate it with other student data that you have on hand, something that all universities have. You will have integration across terms, block 1, block 2, semester 1, semester 2, across courses to actually see who's taking a specific course. I mean, the enrollment numbers for the students who's taking that course, because usually the evaluations data, if it's just by itself, you will have, let's say the enrollment numbers for a course are something like 50, but for the evaluations, you only have something like 20 people responding. So you're not able to track if this data is not integrated, which percentage of students actually manage to complete the evaluations. Having something like this, you can actually see where there are shortfalls in terms of completion, and then you can make plans to start addressing that. You also link it to the instructors. The course is linked to instructor, so you'd have to do it this way anyway. And the rest of the student data. An example of analysis you can derive, given that you've integrated all of your different student areas, is that if you have the course grades from the students, you can actually determine if there's a relationship between the performance of certain students and the topics or specific content that they alluded to in the comments or in the evaluations, open-ended questions. So this is an analysis that you can do. It can either be a correlation that you're trying to determine, or you can try something a bit more robust, like a regression analysis of some sort, something like that. The second part is, so now that let's say that you had your data infrastructure in place, you have to use robust analytic tools. You've seen with the one that we're using now, there are, how do you say, shortcomings with certain tools. So you do want to maybe focus on making sure that you're using a tool that is known to be robust and where there's also perhaps skills available. Like if you're looking for someone who can do something in a specific tool, then you have that available as well. In our department here at the University of the Witwatersrand, we use NIME quite extensively. It's very powerful, colleagues. If you've been looking for a tool that is visual, you found it. Just start using this. There's lots of documentation, plenty of videos, and it can do some amazing things as well. Earlier, we were talking about how you can, in Python, import certain models and actually get specific outputs. You can do the same thing in NIME. You can literally get a model that has been developed by someone else and use it inside your workflow and get outputs. NIME is very powerful. Use it, colleagues. And then can incorporate statistical models and derive output. That's already been talked about. And then for coding options, use Python. I'm sure R falls in here as well, but I don't have enough. hands-on experience with R to actually give any sort of recommendations. So in terms of the data aggregation you can do, because the point of this is that you're not just trying to do something at a course level, you want to see if you can abstract the insights out from just a course level to perhaps a school level and a faculty level as well. So in terms of getting that sort of abstraction out, you can group insights across modules or courses, across different schools, faculties, and then you can determine where there is commonality. You very well might find that a faculty has a common problem across a lot of different courses, and that could be a linchpin target to say, one that if you fix it, perhaps at a school level, then you're actually targeting a lot of different the same problem occurring at different places at the same time. You can also do an aggregation according to the teaching modes, which is in-person, hybrid, and online. I know that sometimes, well, a little bit earlier, we had issues with protests regarding the whole NSFAS situation, and some of the teaching had to be taken completely online for a short period of time. So that could be analysis that could be done on the online teaching modes to see exactly what sort of issues take place in those teaching modalities. And then the analysis can also be ordinal or time frame based. You can see what sort of issues have been occurring at a specific year and then just try to see if it keeps occurring, if it's going down, or if it's going up, because that might hint to a problem that is not being adequately addressed. And if you're trying to get some sort of action in place to actually address it by showing that this is something that has been occurring on a yearly basis, that is so much more of a powerful argument to make than saying, okay, this is just a problem in 1 year. Then surfacing the insights. So we have specific BI tools that we use for surfacing any sort of insights. You can feed your analysis into tools like Power BI or Tableau, or depending on which specific BI tool that you have at your establishment institution. Power BI is probably the one that most of us actually have access to because it's part of the Microsoft 365, which a lot of institutions actually have in place. So that's something to look into. Then you can have heat maps of dissatisfaction to showcase courses where ratings are not great. This reminds me, this specific use case, for instance, when the whole tariff thing started happening, was it last week? And then you see there are certain profiles which share how much the stock exchange has been impacted by the tariffs. And then you can actually see by each different business or listing on the stock exchange, you can see which ones are in the red. And it's such a powerful visual. It's such an impactful visual because you can literally see by having a heat map that shows reds versus greens, for instance, what's doing well and what's doing badly. And then by having that comparison, you can tell if a faculty or a school is in trouble or not. So that's one idea. Then you can also rank emerging concerns, maybe by importance, sometimes by firstly, the first ranking you can think of is to say by importance, which is how frequently is this problem popping up? Or you can actually rank them up by which one is actually easier to address. So even if something is appearing several times, it might be quite tough to actually adequately address, but you can actually have a ranking which shows, okay, these would be the easier things to address. Okay, stakeholder alignment, which is where a lot of things usually fall apart. I don't know how easy this would be to do, but you map your findings to your specific stakeholders. Like certain problems pop up for where only specific stakeholders can actually address them. So if you have that mapping to your findings, to your specific stakeholders, then it makes it so much easier to have a level of accountability regarding any action being taken on those items. Given that you can also tailor these insights to decision-making roles, this is the stakeholder mapping. So for instance, let's say academics, you have the teaching effectiveness or learning design. So that would, if these get directed to those, then you have the admin issues like scheduling, resource and systems. Then these sort of issues would be directed to those stakeholders. And then you also have student support, well-being triggers, and access concerns. I think, okay, so the last slide, what makes an insight actionable? It has to provide good insight. If you're sharing a specific metric that you're tracking that is coming from your evaluation analysis, it has to provide a good insight, which is probably the problem that well, the most apparent problem that we had during the second session is like, it's so hard to actually get something that could be considered a good insight. So this should be the main purpose of your analysis, to get things which are good insights. If it's a technology issue, then that's something that can be addressed. If it's a scheduling issue, that's something that can be addressed. Stuff like that. It has to point towards something that people understand and people can point a finger to and say there is a specific cause for this. So in terms of another aspect of good insights, is it backed by volume and intensity? This is why you'd want to do this maybe across time spans to see if something has been occurring consistently throughout the years. So that would be a volume or intensity based. Then you also have points to a changeable factor, because sometimes the issues that students experience and they point out and they might be ranked highly are not necessarily things that as an institution you can do something about. So you want to make sure that you want to make sure that you actually point towards factors which are changeable. I think one of the biggest issues that we had specifically with our student success initiatives is that we are telling the advisors and the faculties these are the students who are in trouble, but at the same time, you can't point to a specific changeable factor that they can do something about. So this is quite important, actually coming in actually generating an actionable insight. And also, is the priority aligned with the institution's priority? Is the insight aligned with the institution's priority? Sometimes institutions are focused on inclusion, making sure that there's good representation, all sorts of factors regarding that. Then there's also quality of teaching. Sometimes there's research as well, which you can put there. So it depends on what your institution's priorities are. What is your institution trying to achieve? And then, is this insight, can you measure it again after you've had an intervention? So say that you've dealt with the technology, you've put an intervention in place to deal with the technology issue. Are you now seeing that come through in the feedback once you have measured that? Okay, colleagues, I think that is the end of it. I will share a document with goes a little bit more into detail regarding this. I also have a template framework to share with you all. It's in PDF format to just sort of give you, how do you say? Well, it's a template to see if you can actually get running with some of these suggestions. Okay, I'm going to go to the comments now. Is KNIME open source? Not necessarily open source, but it's free to use for the desktop application. If you want to use the online version, then you have to pay for. But on your desktop, it's free to use. It would be interesting if you can share examples of how you use KNIME with pre-developed models, if there is a way of showing without sharing private information. I can definitely do this, colleagues. If you're interested, please let Ashton and Kudeja know if you'd like perhaps a follow-up workshop where we go through KNIME. I can show you from start to finish how you can actually make use of this tool. It is excellent. This has been very interesting and helpful. Okay. Will you be sharing the slides? I'll be sharing them through Ashton, well, through Sadie. We'll see how they want them formatted first, but definitely we'll be sharing the slides. Would be interested in seeing how the KNIME models work. Yes, I've sold it quite hard. So no wonder there's interest for that, but I'll definitely do that. Okay, colleagues, any last questions, comments, applause, you know?
Can I quickly chip in?
Yes, please, Herman.
It was very, very interesting, and just hearing from the colleagues as well is quite useful. I'm less interested in an introduction to NIME and more interested in knowing how you use it. So if there is something like a follow-up workshop showing processes that you're allowed to share and how you're actually implementing it, because there's a lot of information on how we can use tools, and there's a lot of tools to use. And we're obviously vested in the ones that we're using. So I can translate your thoughts perhaps to my workflows, but it'd be interesting to then know how it is that you're actually integrating the data and using it for your own purposes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have a sit down with our Siyaphumelela head and with Sadie as well and see what would be the best way forward. But I think if we're not doing it through Siyaphumelela, then you're more than welcome to send me an email. I've included the email in the program agenda. So if you have that and what is it? The where it says what the workshop is about, you can also find my email there. So please feel free to email me, and then it could even be quick for your specific use case since you've tried out so many other tools. So yeah, no problem. Thanks, colleagues. Thank you.
Thakatau,
Is that anyway?
yeah, is this your first workshop? I heard you mention that this is the second one. I didn't attend the first one. Where could I find the recording of the first one?
This is the first one for Siyaphumelela for this year.
Okay, but
I
on
think I said
student,
maybe I can do another
on
one.
student feedback per se, is this your first one on Siyaphumelela?
No, I did a workshop. No, a presentation. I think it was 2 or 3 years back. This is the second one from that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Using another platform. Where was it? Internally at your university?
So I was showcasing how we use our learning management system data to inform student performance. So we were
Okay.
doing an exercise to determine how much time students spend on the system, and is that in any way or form related to their performance? And then if it is related to their performance for a specific course, can we make recommendations to say that students should actually be engaging with the course material to a greater degree than what they're currently doing?
Okay. Just the last one. Where are you based in your institution?
So I am
In
part
terms
of
the
the
work that you do, because it seems like you are interpreting and analyzing all sorts of data.
yes, so I'm in a very comfy and central position. So we have a department called Business Intelligence Services,
Okay.
and the head of our department is actually here. Her name is Hashila. You will see Vits next to it. So we're basically a data science department. We do analytics for the university. We have a data engineering team which sources the data for us, and then we have a data science team which does the analytics on it. Then we share those findings with the university.
Okay. So yes, central.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Thakatau.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you. All right. Colleagues, I'll wait until you've all exited so you can just, yeah.
All right then. Bye, colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.